Okay, guys, so now we are moving to the final part of your chapter 6. Okay, the final part of chapter 6 is not actually that long, so I might just mix it together with the tutorial session. Let's see how it goes because it's actually quite short. Okay, what we're going to do in this area or in this topic, in this part of the topic, is we are going to learn about cash management models. So here you can see in your notes from chapter 6 that I've cash management models written. All right, so what I want you to do, right? I want you to be able to identify what is the difference between your Bomber model and your Miller model. So you are already aware that there are two different types of models that we are looking at in this area. Number one, we are looking at the Bomber model, and number two, we are looking at the Miller model. So what is the Bomber model and what is the Miller model, and what is the reason we actually look at these two models? So in this topic, managing cash flows, what you're actually doing is, okay, we are trying to identify what is the cash surplus and cash deficit, number one. So how we did that? We used the cash flow forecast to identify the cash surplus and cash deficit. And then for the next part, what we are doing is we are now identifying how much money do you need to hold in your company in order for you to be able to resume or run your day-to-day operation without any shortage of cash. All right. So this Bomber model, it is actually the adaptation of the EOQ model. So you can see here, it is an adaptation of the EOQ model. What it helps is, it helps to decide what is the optimum cash balance that your company needs to withdraw or your company needs to hold at one time so that you meet your day-to-day obligation. So how would you do that, right? You will, number one, assume that you consume a fixed amount of cash, a constant amount of cash, right, in your operations or in your business, right? And you also make the assumption that your company, they hold stocks that are tradable, that can be sold whenever you need cash. So because you are holding this this cash or this investment, you have to incur a cost of holding the cash. Okay, so when you hold the cash, you cannot invest. So this is actually an opportunity cost, right? And there will be a certain cost involved when you are placing the order for your selling your securities. All right. So now, when you look at this Bomber model, actually to make it simple, if you remember, your EOQ was T2 COD over CH. What you need to remember is that this is similar, but it's not the same, all right, to your Bomber model. What is the Bomber model, guys? I'm going to write it down here because I don't have enough space. Your Bomber model is 2 CS over I squared, right? So C stands for the transaction cost. S is the demand or the total amount of cash required. I is the interest cost of holding your cash. Remember, this interest here has to be a net interest cost. When I say net interest, that means deposit minus borrowing. C is your transaction cost. while S is your total cash required, right? So as I said before, you are assuming that cash is used at a steady rate during the year, but in reality, no, because sometimes you may require a higher amount of cash and sometimes you may require a lesser amount of cash, right? So now let's try to do one question relating to the Bomber model. So I think you can look at your lecture examples. Example number 8. A business is expected to move 500,000 from its interest-bearing account over to the course of 1 year. The interest rate is 7%. Cost of making the transfer is 250%. So this is your cash requirement. So which is also equals to the value of S. This is the value of C, and this is your value of I. So how much should the business transfer into cash each time it makes the transfer? So you use the formula 2CS over I to 250, 500,000, 0.07 is 2 multiply 250 multiply 500,000 divided by 0.07 squared is 59,761,000. So the optimal amount of cash for you to hold is actually 59,761. All right. The next one, using the information in illustration 1, calculate the total cost to the business each year of their cash management policy. So if you want to calculate the total cost of the cash management policy, right, how much is it? So you need to first identify how many times you need to make the transfer. So 500,000 divided by 59,761 is equals to the number of times you need to make the transfer. So it's about 8.4 times. Each time you transfer, it costs you $250. So the total amount would be, or the total cost would be 2092. Right? Now, Bomber model is as simple as that. Okay, you can try the other examples yourself because it's very similar. Okay, now never mind guys, I'll just do it together with you. Okay, so what is the optimal deposit size? So you have here SSS has an annual transaction of 9 million. So this is the value of S, the total amount of cash required. The fixed cost of converting securities into cash is 264.5. The opportunity cost of funds is 9%. This is the value of I. So to find Q equals to 2 CS over I square root 2 264.5 9 million 123 123. I got not enough space. Okay, wait, let me just make more space available for myself. Okay, 264.5 0.09 square root 2 multiply 264.5 multiply 9 million over 0.09. So the company needs 230,000 of cash each transaction. So guys, I just want to remind you about what the Baumol model means. The Baumol model is actually calculating the amount of cash that you need to hold at one time, at a single point of time. So here, when you look at this company, that means if in total in 1 year he require $9 million at one time, when he wants to withdraw or when he wants to transfer or when he wants to deposit, that means each transaction that he makes will be amounting to 230,000. So assuming I want to calculate how many times does he have to withdraw the amount or how many times he have to transfer or deposit the amount, you take 9 million, you divide by 230,000, you will get the number of times that you need to make the transfer or you need to withdraw or you need to deposit your money. Because you're calculating, actually what you're doing is you're calculating how much money do you need to hold at one time, at a single period, for you to be able to in totality achieve $9,000. Why I need to calculate this is because I don't want to take out too much money from my account. If I take out too much money, the extra amount that is left in my organization, nothing to do. You have nothing to do. It's sitting there, it's redundant. So that's why you only take out how much you need, so that the other cash amount that sit inside your company account will be able to earn you a certain amount of return. All right. So the idea is that somewhat similar to the EOQ model. In the EOQ model, we only take out the amount of inventory. Sorry, we don't take out. We buy only the amount of inventory that is required to meet the annual demand. So assuming when we did the calculation, the value of Q is actually the amount of inventory that your company will purchase at one time in order for you to be able to achieve the total demand, at the same time reducing the holding cost for your company. So you can see the relationship, right? Q is the amount that you hold, demand is the total that you need, and you do that because you want to reduce holding costs. So in these circumstances, in this scenario, in a Baumol model, what you are doing is you are calculating how much money you will take out at one time, so that this amount of money will be equal or will allow your company to still meet their obligations. At the same time, you do not take too much money out, because when you take out too much money, you have a loss in interest. So you want to reduce the loss in interest. All right. So that is why you use the Baumol model. So effectively, it's just calculating the optimal amount of cash available. Now, I've got one example here. It's a partial question. It's an objective question. Let's do this together. All right. Let me check what year is this from, so that I can help you guys. Okay. I will let you know in a while, because I need to go and search it up, but I will let you know in a bit. All right. Now, according to the Baumol model, what is the optimum amount of short-term investment to convert into cash in each transaction? So, based on the question, you need to calculate, or you need to identify, because he said Baumol model, 2CS over I square root, right? So the company needs 150,000 each year for regular payments. So remember, always this will be expressed in annual figures. Converting the company's short-term investment into cash to meet these regular payments incur a fixed cost of 400 per transaction. So this is my transaction cost or value of C. The short-term investment pay interest of 5% per year. The company earns only 1% per year on cash deposits. So when you look at this um, information that is given, C as is given, I, please remember to calculate the net interest, which is 5% minus 1%. Your opportunity cost would be 4%, or your interest cost would be 4%. Now, so 2, value of C 400, value of S 150,000 over I is 0.04. I already did the calculation here. Square root. What is the value? 2 multiply by 400, multiply 150,000, divide by 0.04. Okay, square root, you have the answer should be 54,772. So the answer should be C. Okay guys, just to let you know, this question is a MCQ June 2015 question. All right, now it's as easy as this. No complication in this question. It's just whether or not you know how to identify each elements of your bomber model. Okay, now so when you talk about the bomber model, right, similar to the EOQ model, there are certain limitations of the bomber model. So what is the limitation of your bomber model? Number one, it assumes that cash is used on a constant basis. Hold on, let me just share my slides. Okay, then you assume that cash is used at a steady rate during the year. The reality is that cash outflows normally will occur at different times with different due dates. So you cannot assume that it's actually constant disbursement rate, right? So that is an unrealistic assumption. Besides that, you also assume that there are no cash receipts that you will have during the period of which you are estimating your value of Q. The reality is that if your company is actively involved in trading their goods and services, okay, trading their goods or providing services, definitely there will be a cash inflow and a cash outflow on a frequent basis. So again, this is an unrealistic model. And similar to the EOQ model, the Balmer model does not account for any buffer cash, right? There is no allowance for buffer cash, okay? Which again, when you are running an organization on a day-to-day basis, you need to have a certain amount of cash flow for contingency purpose. In fact, just now when I was teaching you the reasons for holding cash, one of the reasons for holding cash is for contingency purposes, right? So the problem or the limitations of the bomber model actually relates to all the assumptions that you make on this model. All right, so it's actually quite simple and quite straightforward. It is unlikely that examiner is going to make it very complicated for you, because there isn't any complication in this area. All right, probably the one and only complication is to calculate the net interest. That's all. All right, so with that, I think we can move to the next model. Okay, our Miller-Orr model. To do the Miller-Orr model, what is of utmost importance? Okay, you need to first understand the difference between the Baumol model and the Miller-Orr model. All right. So the Baumol model is actually um, an adaptation of the EOQ. You are finding the optimum cash held, okay, using a uh, using assumptions that cash is held or cash is dispersed on a constant rate. But the Miller-Orr model is actually a little bit more realistic because it looks at cash movement in your company on a day-to-day basis. When I say it looks at cash movement in your company on a day-to-day basis, what it means is that it actually accounts for the cash inflow and cash outflow that fluctuates on a day-to-day basis. All right. So normally when you do a Miller-Orr model, okay, I love to draw this for you, even though my drawing is not really that great. So your cash, okay, it's a very terrible drawing, but okay, the point is this is your daily fluctuation of cash. That means your cash fluctuates on a day-to-day basis. Now, why is it important to identify your cash fluctuation as on a day-to-day basis? Because by identifying the cash fluctuation on a day-to-day basis, you are able to identify what is the highest amount of cash that is required by your company and what is the lowest amount of cash that is required by your company. So the higher cash balance is what you call the upper limit, and the lower cash balance is what you call the lower limit. Well, if I want to make it a little bit more realistic, talk about yourself. If you look at your cash expenses for a month, you track your daily expenses, you may realize that there will be times where you only used up 5 ringgit a day, and there might be times where you probably had to use about 250 ringgit a day. Probably. Maybe you had to buy something important. Maybe you needed to buy your textbook, right? So the highest amount that you required was 250 ringgit, and the lowest amount that was required is only 5 ringgit. But then, to be realistic, just because one day you held or you used up 250 ringgit, will you ensure that every day you have 250 ringgit? No, because the likelihood for you to use that 250 ringgit is very low, right? So what you want to do is you want to be able to identify how much that you require on a daily basis for you to sustain your day-to-day routine. That means maybe for you to buy your lunch, your breakfast, your dinner on a daily basis. Let's say on average, you need to maintain about 20 ringgit a day. So if you need to maintain 20 ringgit a day, you need to ensure that you have on average every day you keep 20 ringgit. Why? Because you will definitely use the average amount of 20 ringgit a day. So if I apply this situation or this scenario to a company, what happens is that the upper limit is the highest amount of cash that is required by the organization. The lower limit is the lower cash requirement by the organization. And your average, your 20 ringgit, you actually call it a return point, where the return point is actually the amount that you need to maintain to ensure you are able to run your day-to-day activities, right? So here, lower limit of cash is decided upon. So you must ensure you have the lower limit because that is the minimum amount that you will spend, right? Now, to do the question relating to the Miller-Orr model, I actually have 4 steps, right? What are my 4 steps? Okay. Step number 1, identify lower limit. Step number 2, calculate spread. Calculate spread. Step number 3, identify upper limit. And step number 4, calculate your return point. Okay, guys, I'm going to move from this page. I'm going to move out to a new page because I need to write some things for you. Okay, so chapter 6. Okay, now I'm talking about the Miller-Orr model. Right, so the steps. I'm just going to rewrite here very quickly. Okay, it's quite funny that this thing is moving together with me. Okay, so step number 1, identify lower limit. Step number 2, calculate spread. Step number 3, identify upper limit. How you do it is 1 plus 2. Step number 4, return point. Okay, guys, you need to know that all the formulas here would be given by your examiner in his formula sheet. But the more important thing for you to understand is that why do I do this? The reason I do this is because effectively I want to calculate. My objective here is to calculate the return point, because the return point is the amount that my company will have to maintain on a day-to-day basis so that you are able to keep, or you are able to run your day-to-day operations. All right, now so when you do your steps, I also want you to remember one thing. Usually you start with step number 1, and this information is given in the question. The examiner will definitely give this in the question. To calculate your spread, you need to use a formula. What is the formula that you use to calculate spread? Okay, so I'm going to write it without explaining anything first. 3 over 4 multiplied by transaction cost multiplied by variation in cash flow over, this should be daily interest rate, to the power of 1 over 3, right? So this is the formula for spread. Okay, please remember this is very important. You need to identify what is your daily interest rate, and then the formula for your return point will be 1 over 3 multiplied by spread plus lower limit. 1 over 3 multiplied by spread plus lower limit. Okay, so what I want you to understand is that, okay, sometimes your company has a higher amount of cash balances, okay, but what you need actually is only the written point. Only the written point is required for you to run your day-to-day operations effectively. So, assuming you have cash more than the written point, what you would do is that excess cash you would invest it, right? So your company will buy securities to invest that cash because that surplus cash is redundant, it's not going to earn you anything. So you invest it to earn a return. Now, if you have amount that is lesser than the written point, because you must remember the amount that you need to maintain is the written point. If you have cash lower or lesser than the written point, what you need to do is you need to bring the cash back up to the written point. What you do to increase the cash of your company, you actually would sell the company investments, securities that you have bought to increase back the cash flow to the written point. So you must remember your ultimate objective of your company is that you want to hold cash at the written point because that is the amount that you hold on a day-to-day basis to enable your organization to run their day-to-day activities. Right? Now, where is the spread? Okay, spread is actually, let me just draw the graph here again. I mean, again, it's not that great. Let's say, where's my, wait now guys, it's hanging. Yeah, okay. So let's see. Okay, so let's say this is your upper limit. Oh my god, my upper limit is higher than my axis. It's not supposed to happen. Okay, I'm just going to redraw my axis. Okay, so this is the highest amount of cash, which is your upper limit. This is the lowest amount of cash, which is your lower limit. And I'm just going to draw a random line here, assuming this is my written point. So if I have, change color, if I have excess cash, I would invest it. If I have lesser cash, I would sell investment so that I will get back the money so that I can return the cash back to written point. The spread is actually your daily or the range of cash that you require in your company spread. That means from the lower limit to the upper limit. That is the range of cash flow that you have or that you require in your company on a day-to-day basis. All right. So actually, Miller-Orr model is quite simple, it's quite straightforward. Now, what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of the Miller-Orr model? So now, when you talk about the Miller-Orr model, okay, when I say the benefits or the usefulness of the Miller-Orr model, why is it useful? Because it takes into account the cash movement on a day-to-day basis. That means they acknowledge that cash flow of your company, cash requirement of your company, it changes on a day-to-day basis and there isn't a fixed way of how your cash moves. Number two, they also acknowledge the fact that there will be cash inflow on some days and there will be cash outflow on some days. That means if like the Bomber model, you only assume that there are cash outflow, you never assume or you did not make way for cash inflow. But this model, the Miller-Orr model, it allows for the changes or cash inflow into your company. And when you talk about the limitation, number one, it may be difficult to identify the lower limit, upper limit, or to calculate the spread, all right? And in order for you to be able to use the Miller-Orr model beneficially, you need to monitor the cash requirement consistently to ensure that the model is actually appropriately applied and it's useful to your company, right? So with that, I think we can start or try a question. Okay, let's look at your working capital lecture example. All right, it's quite simple, it's quite straightforward. Here, if a company must maintain a minimum cash balance of 8,000, okay, so this 8,000 is the lower limit, and a variance of cash flow is 4 million. The cost of buying and selling securities is $50, and the daily interest rate is 0.025%. What is your upper limit, spread, and the return point? So we will use the 4 steps. Okay, wait guys, let me just double check whether I'm sharing the screen correctly. Okay, so step number 1, lower limit. Lower limit was already given, 8,000. Step number 2, spread. Okay, how do you calculate the spread? Right. So remember your formula, 3 over 4 multiply transaction cost multiply variation over interest to the power of 1 over 3. So here 3 over 4 multiplied by transaction cost was $50, right? Variation is 4 million. Please remember to show this in your daily interest. It has to be in decimal place. Okay, so 0.00025. So 0.00025, okay, 0.00025 to the power of 1 over 3. Guys, please remember, when you do the one in the bracket first. This is step number 1. Number 2 to the power of, then only you multiply by 3. Please don't do it wrongly. Okay, 50 multiply 4 million. Divide by 0.025%. Multiply 3 over 4 to the power of 1 over 3. Multiply by 3. 25,303. You should get the answer 25,303. All right. So spread 25,303. Now, step number 3 to calculate upper limit equals to 25,303 plus lower limit of 8,000. 33,303. And then finally, step number 4, return point. Okay, what is the formula for return point? Return point is 1 over 3 spread plus lower limit. 1 over 3 spread plus lower limit multiply 25,303 plus 8,000. So 25,303 divided by 3. Okay, your return point should be 16,434. 16,434. All right. Okay. Quite simple, quite straightforward. I think in this particular area, the most difficult one is to calculate spread because of the formula. But again, if you know how to use these formulas, the brackets, well enough, you will be able to solve this question quite easily. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a partial question. This question is from June 2012. Let me share screen first. June 2012 here. Wapnik, it's its name. June 2012. It's a Miller-Orr model question. It's quite simple. It's quite straightforward. It's something that, is easy for you guys to handle. That means I believe that actually these questions are quite straightforward. Now, calculate Miller-Orr model. So he just asked you to calculate upper limit and return point. Explain how this could be used to manage cash balances of Wapnik. Wapnik is considering using Miller-Orr model to manage its cash flows. The minimum cash balance will be 200,000. So this is lower limit. The spread is expected to be 75,000. So if I want to calculate return point, no matter what happens, I'm going to use 4 steps. Number 1, lower limit 200,000. Number 2, spread. You're so lucky that in this question, your examiner gave you the spread. Number 3, upper limit. Upper limit is 75,000 plus 200,000. So you have 275,000. And finally, number 4, return point. So how do you calculate your return point? 1/3 multiply 75,000 plus 200,000. So this is 225,000. So the return point would be 225,000. The upper limit would be 275,000. Now, I just want to remind you, okay? Remember I told you the spread is the difference or the range between your upper limit and lower limit. So here your lower limit is 200,000. Upper limit is 275,000. So your spread is 75,000. So just want to demonstrate to you that you actually can get the upper limit and the lower limit and the spread. You can understand the concept once I've put values to it. All right. So he has also asked you, how would this be used to manage the cash balances? So when he asks you how it's used to manage the cash balances, what would you say? Okay. You have to explain to him, number 1, you are identifying the lower limit to check what is the lowest cash requirement. If I could type it out, it would be great. Yes. Okay. Here. The lower limit is identified to determine the minimum cash required by Wapnik. Also, the upper limit determines the higher cash requirement by Wapnick. The next one would be your spread. Spread identifies the range of cash flow required by company. Using these values, the return point is. Now you need to explain to him what is the um return point. So the return point is the cash required by Wapnick to maintain its day-to-day operation effectively. Now he asks you how you use these values to manage your cash balance. So how you use it is when your cash flow is higher than the return point. That means when you have excess or surplus cash flows, you will invest those amounts. So if Wapnick, maybe I make it nicer. Okay, to enable efficient cash management, when the cash exceeds the return point, Wapnick should invest this amount in securities to enable the cash surplus to earn a return. On the other hand, when there is a cash deficit in the company, this amount will have to be increased to the return point in order to do so. The cash invested in securities will have to be sold to increase cash balance to. There you go. You already explained what are the meaning of each element and how you manage cash. But guys, this is just for your knowledge. For the purpose of the question, you only need these 3 points. Okay, how you manage the cash. You don't need to write the others. But for your revision, yes, you need to read all this so that you will have a clearer view on why the company performs such tasks. All right. If you want to know what you can even do, you can even identify what is the cash amount that can be invested and what is the cash amount that you need to sell. All right. So example, okay, return point is 225, upper limit is 275. So the amount that can be invested is anything more than the return point, which is 275 minus 225. So the amount invested will be 50,000. Okay, assuming you have a cash deficit, you need to sell investments or sell whatever securities that you have. How much you have to sell? Okay, you look at the difference between return point and your cash balances, your lower limit. So 25,000 needs to be sold in order for you to be able to um, increase the cash balance back to your return point. Right. So with that, actually, we are done with this particular question. And with this, we have also completed chapter 6. Right. So I will see you guys in the next video.